Some Russian women demand that their men be allowed to return home. Growing movement says men have been fighting for too long. Moscow. December 5. Maria Andreeva, whose husband has been fighting in Ukraine for more than a year, is also fighting a battle in Moscow to bring him home. A growing women's movement in Russia is demanding the return from the front of their husbands, sons and brothers, who were mobilized after President Vladimir Putin's decree in September last year. Initially, movement pledged allegiance to what the Kremlin called a special military operation, but reaction they received was a hardening of some of their ideas, which they considered superficial. Since Andreeva's husband mobilized and went to Ukraine last year, he has only returned for 2 short holidays to see his wife and young daughter. His wife says this is inadequate for a soldier fighting in combat. We want our men to be demobilized so can return home because we think they have done everything could do for over a year and more. Andreeva, 34, told in an interview in Moscow, "For me, this is not only fight to make sure my daughter has a father, but it's also fight for my marriage. Tackling the movement is a sensitive issue for the Kremlin." Moscow, which sent tens of thousands of soldiers to Ukraine February 2022, had tolerated higher death rates in previous wars than was politically acceptable Western countries. But the growing movement Russian women highlights the complexity and inherent inequality of keeping so many men in combat for so long, while many men fighting age also remain at home. A group of mothers of Russian soldiers campaigned for better conditions for their sons who served in the armed forces as the Soviet Union collapsed and later returned from wars in Russia's Chechnya region. It is too early to assess the size or impact of Russian women's movement in a society that officials say is united behind the war effort. Women in Ukraine also demanded that their men be allowed to return from the front. When asked about the dangers of speaking out in wartime Russia, Andreeva said, "I want you to understand it's not scary anymore because it's not possible to endure all this anymore. It's too much." Did not request or receive any military or potentially sensitive information from Andreeva. He requested that his wife's identity not be disclosed. Loyal? Maria Andreeva, whose husband is mobilized to join Russian armed forces participating in a military operation Ukraine. October 2022. Poses for a photo front central headquarters of State Duma, Lower House Parliament, Moscow, Russia. The 30th of November 2023. Yulia Morozova receives licensing rights when Putin ordered the partial mobilization 300,000 reservists in September 2022. Hundreds of thousands young men flocked to leave Russia. Millions did not leave, and some were called to war. Since then, Russia has recruited hundreds of thousands of contract soldiers in the provinces, attracted by high wages. According to former Prezi